was overflowed, half of her body was water. This what began happening to Mary swimming up and trying to have
Oh my
no.
God.
Do anything about it. She couldn't put her legs forward or it would sink. After 2 days of balancing precariously on the float, the parrotfish disappeared and what they called surrounded her. And later she didn't want to say this. Part of this horrible ordeal where she felt this comfort. These dolphins just swam around her. They protected the barrier around her.
Whoa.
They kept the parrotfish away. On November 16, 1961, 84 hours after the Bluebell in the sun, a Greek freighter actually spotted Terry Joe. Amidst all the whitecaps, they were able to see this little girl float over, and there she was. And initially, when they went down to try to get her, there was so many sharks swimming around her that they had to be careful that they didn't accidentally knock her into the water.
Oh my God.
Sharks, but eventually they were able to get Terry Joe in a basket on the ship, and she would then recover. As for Julian Harvey, he made it back to shore and told authorities that the Bluebell had caught fire and had to be drowned. Julian done his best to save them. And as what could happen, literally a police station giving information on what happened when the police were informed that Terry Joe
No
survived.
way.
They said Terry Joe survived. She still has 2 years to make a recovery. And Julian was set for going fully down to his face and then kind of composed himself and said, "Why, that's wonderful." Julian quickly excused himself and fled to a Miami hotel, and the next day he was found dead. This is the picture of Terry Joe who was taken by the sailors trying to make a photo beside her before they pulled her from the ship. This image would soon appear in publications all over the world. Despite Terry Joe's horrifying ordeal, she would go on and live a very good life and have 6 children. So that's gonna do it, guys. Let me know what you thought of it.
That's a crazy one.
Yeah. He literally tried to kill everyone on the boat just to get some money.
And then the idea of getting caught, he's like, oh, fuck that.
Right, that's good too.
Like the like button would just not let us in.
You got the like button. I don't like it.
Yeah, we wouldn't even invite him to the wedding,
We
let's
did
be
everything he
honest.
said, man.
His native English and moved to New York City. Lennon and his wife Yoko Ono took up residence in the Dakota, which is a very famous building that typically houses the rich and famous people. As soon as Lennon moved to New York, he said that he felt relieved because he didn't have to worry about going outside and getting mobbed by a massive crowd of people that were obsessed with the Beatles. There were people that were huge Beatles fans in New York, but they seemed respectful, and they would ask for his autograph, but they would mostly leave him alone. Mark David Chapman had always been a massive fan of the Beatles with a particular interest in John Lennon. But after a 1966 interview where John Lennon, kind of off the cuff, said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, this soured Chapman's adoration of Lennon. One of Chapman's high school friends recalls around this time frame Chapman rewriting the song Imagine by John Lennon to read Imagine if John Lennon was dead. Chapman started referring to Lennon as a
My
poser
God.
and said that he espoused virtues and ideals that he himself did not practice. And so in relative short order, following that 1966 interview, Chapman went from this adoring fan of the Beatles and John Lennon to really solely hating John Lennon and everything he stood for. By 1980, it's safe to say Mark Chapman
'cause he
had
said
become obsessed with John Lennon.
Yeah.
Specifically, he had become obsessed with hating John Lennon. In October of 1980, Chapman quits his job as a security guard and flies to New York City. For 2 months, he stayed in the city and didn't really do much of anything. He would just periodically walk past the Dakota where John Lennon supposedly was living, but beyond that, he really didn't do anything in the city. But that would all change on December 8th, 1980. On that day, Chapman went to the Dakota, stood right outside the entrance to the building, and just waited that he might run into John Lennon. At 5 p.m. that day, John Lennon comes out with his wife Yoko Ono, and they walk right past Mark Chapman and flags him down, and he asked John if he could get his autograph. And John Lennon, because he has a limousine waiting for him, he's starting to notice that, oh, that's John Lennon, he was coming over. John still took the time to sign an autograph for Mark Chapman. He was very friendly with Mark. take care, and John and his wife Yoko turned and went to the meeting. But when the couple got back to the Dakota that night, Mark Chapman had not left John Lennon and Yoko in a vehicle, and they walked past Mark Chapman standing right outside the front door. It's unclear if Mark and John had any interaction, but as soon as they passed Mark and were making their way into the building, Mark Chapman drew a gun and shot John Lennon 4 times in the back. John Lennon staggers to the ground, screaming, "I'm shot, I'm shot," collapsing behind Mark Chapman. What are you doing? He just stood there, put the gun back in his pocket, and waited to be arrested. Chapman's lawyers wanted him to plead insanity, but he refused, and instead said, "I was totally sane. I knew what I was doing. I chose to shoot John Lennon, and I plead guilty." He was given 20 years to life in jail. While he was in jail, he would admit the only reason he did that was to become famous. That was it. This is the picture of Mark Chapman getting that autograph from John Lennon in front of Dakota just hours before he was gunned down. He's still in jail today, and he actually just had his 11th parole hearing last month in August of 2020.
It's so crazy.
Yeah.
So one wrong thing, and then just kind of I mean, it's a different time too. It was like as huge. Like the fact that like actually really wild.
On July 17, 2014, people at Amsterdam's bustling metro the 283 passengers on board, all of whom some were traveling for vacation, some were from home, others were traveling business. In addition to the 283 passengers, 15 crew members had rounded out the flight to a total of 298 people on board MH17. One of the passengers, before walking down the runway to get on the flight, took a picture of the plane itself and uploaded it to Facebook, and kind of jokingly captioned it, "If we go missing, this is what it looks like," in reference to another plane, flight 370, that had actually gone missing. Once the boarding was complete on MH17, one of the passengers on board uploaded to Instagram a short video of passengers stuffing their luggage in bins, and the captain coming over the intercom saying that the boarding is complete and it's time to turn off your cell phones. A 15-year-old Dutch boy named Gary Slock and his mother Petra had just sat down inside the plane, and they could barely contain their excitement. The pair had signed up for what they were calling a vacation of a lifetime, with a group that took the single parents and their children on these lavish vacations. Gary, who was the goalkeeper for the soccer team, had been telling his family how jealous his teammates were of this trip and was about to go on to his mother. Before Gary turned off his phone, as instructed by the captain, he took a selfie of he and his mom grinning ear to ear, excited about their trip, and he uploaded it on Facebook for his friends and family to see. Gary turns off his cell phone, puts it away, and he and his mom sit back and get ready to take off. The plane takes off without a hitch, gets up to cruising altitude, and it's going to be a long flight. It's about 12 hours from Amsterdam to Baltimore, and so everybody on board is kind of settling in, and the iPads out, getting the book out, maybe. The crew is making their rounds, offering snacks and drinks, and people look out the window. It's a beautiful day, and everybody's just kind of settling in for a long flight. About 3 hours after takeoff, around 4 p.m., the captain of MH17 got in touch with air traffic control at the nearby airport, which was in Ukraine. The pilot told the controllers that everything's fine, it was flight level, 33,000 feet. The controllers acknowledged that and said, "Hey, there's a little bit of air traffic in the direction you're going. You need to reroute your course very slightly." The pilot acknowledged this change in course and was beginning to tell them what he's doing next when he cut out the controllers on the ground and range and hailing MH17 to try to get the captain back in line so they couldn't reach him. The plane had sent no distress signals over the course of their communication. The controllers had not noticed anything unusual. And so this sudden radio silence really didn't make any sense. Yelena Brichenko was a 20-year-old bank teller living in Ukraine who happened to be looking up right as MH17 was flying, and she would later say that what she saw would haunt her for the rest of the flight. As she was watching MH17 just explode, and people inside of the plane very clearly get ejected out of the plane, and she's watching it as people in the bits of the plane are falling 33,000